and dependable. But actually what is relevant is available. And even if you say, in fact, we had this debate earlier on, several months ago as we were doing the discussions, consultations, is there an oversupply situation, or are we in a tight market? The fact that we have yellow and red alerts more in this year than the last 2 or 3 years flies in the face of any assertion that there's potentially an oversupply. Or maybe the system is not optimized, goes to the point of rain. About more than 60% of our power generation is 16 years and older. It's an ERC finding. So your outages, and you only suffer this during the summer months, is higher. In fact, our forced outage rates, which is a metric to measure how well you maintain your generation fleet in the Philippines, is far off, let's say, North American standards is what we could find. So that's something to think about in terms of how to deal with an aging fleet, optimizing, and that brings the question, having more generation. And I think, to Gael's point, how to execute their nice policies, nice things to talk about, but at the end of the day, if you do not execute, then we just talk about it. We've been talking about the permits that Jay has been mentioning for the last several months, years, and it's still an issue, I know, with their RE developers. You know, there are hundreds of signatures that you need to get, and I think in a sector as critical as this, you need to really trim the fat and try to be as efficient. Economic development versus electricity consumption, there was that section in the policy paper that strives to see the correlation. And I think rather than belabor whether one affects the other, and I'm sure there has to be some effect, I think the thinking is how do we ensure better growth to spur economic growth. There's and this was in the paper, there was a transmission, it was a transmission issue, not so much a generation issue, interconnection with Boracay. And you saw the number there, just tourism revenues alone in the last 7 to 10 years grew about tenfold. So certainly domestically, there has to be a positive reinforcement in terms of an improved and more efficient system, whether it's generation that increase electricity consumption or even a transmission grid. So any reactions or thoughts? Yusek?
With regard to the forecast, in fact, the forecast that we did up to 2040 really starts off with available capacity, because precisely we were of the view that we should not be looking at installed or dependable, but actually available. In our calculation, available capacity is 70% of installed capacity. Dependable is 90% of installed capacity. So precisely we started with a available capacity as the starting point for that one. Now, with regard to delinking consumption with GDP, I think it's pleasant to inform that the signing of the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, in fact, supports that delinking. If energy intensity as the measure, which is consumption over GDP, actually it's a focus of within the ASEAN member states. But we are now looking at energy intensity as a measure. So the other issue that I would like to take up is this issue of reserves, because really these yellow and red alerts are really a result of low reserves. And when you talk of reserves, both transmission and distribution are affected, because it has to be stated that much is to be deserved, much is to be expected out of our transmission operator.
In fact, we are now seriously looking of being more serious in expecting them to do their job. So, because really they have to come up with the reserves which serves the 5 types of reserves. The regulating reserve, which is supposed to be 4% of total peak demand. Number 2 is contingency reserve. If one breaks down, actually it's the highest or the biggest generation unit. They have to have that. The second one is the dispatchable, which is supposed to be equivalent to the contingency. Then you have to have the reactive power reserve. Then you have to have the black start. In other words, when everything is zero or no electricity, there should be a capacity that would jumpstart the whole system. So, but these are not being complied with. That's why we are now very serious in looking at making them do their mandate, their obligation, because this is now an issue of public interest. So, again, on the distribution side, we appreciate that they now see the importance of replacement power, because that has always been our issue. That whenever there is a PSA, there should be an amount that is supposed to cover for outages, be it plant outages, plant maintenance outages, or unplanned maintenance outages, or forced outages. This has to be covered with replacement power. Whether it's the GenCo side or the distribution side, whatever it is, it has to be covered. So, that's why we always say that we have to have replacement power or reserves. And if you want to quantify it, it's so easy. You just divide GDP over total gigawatt hours. That's the cost of an outage upon 1 hour. And then you compare it to capacity fee, which is supposed to match that. It's a no-brainer that you have to have reserves or replacement power. In fact, I keep on complaining that apparently consumers do not understand that there's a cost to reliable power, and that the cost of no power is higher than the cost of capacity fee. So, I think, and consumers must realize that we have all been misled of this notion that you don't pay for power if there is no power plant operating. There has to be a standby power, and you have to pay for it, even if it's not operating. So this mindset has to change, that you have to pay for capacities on reserve. So, yeah, I think that's...
Thank you, Secretary Manny.
Thanks, John. I'd just like to echo what the Undersecretary just mentioned. Especially on reserves, the way we're providing capacity for reserves today, there's really no plant that's built specifically to provide reserves. All the plants, right, are actually built to provide energy or to meet a certain energy demand. That's why energy is only the leading utility in terms of capacity, in terms of supply and demand, right? Everything's lagging, but energy is still leading in most places, right? But the way reserves are being bought or provided, it's being carved out of the plants that are built and sized to provide energy. So if you take that small quantities, as you mentioned, CR is like 647 megawatts, which is the largest running unit. So from a facility, say you build a 300 megawatt plant, then it will qualify to provide ancillary. Then you take out 30 or 60 megawatts out of that. Then that plant is short to provide energy already. So it's always a catch-up game. So there has to be a policy or a rule that ancillary services should also be forward contracted, right? There has to be a rule that NGCP should be allowed to contract the plant forward, because now NGCP is contracting plants that are existing and qualified to provide the plant, and only when it passes the test, right, sir? So that will, if that's the situation, we will always be lagging in terms of providing services. And we talked about supply and having the right amount. To me, as a generator representing British Power, three things are certain. Right? Climate change is upon us. EPIRA is working, and the climate is going to be more competitive as we move forward. Right? Prices are really going down, and as a generator, that's something that we have to live with, and we're happy the law is really working, especially for those getting power because you're in open access. But supply should also be the demand. Right? So there has to be balance. The supply should be reliable, of course, as Ray mentioned, should be affordable, and at the end of the day, sustainable as well. But the demand has to be met with supply, and that one that balance has always have to be considered at the end.
Jay, you want to say something?
I just wanted to say we wouldn't be talking about reserves if it's easy to build power plants in the first place. 2 years ago, there was a process conducted by Arangkada for a wind energy farm. And unfortunately, the DOE was not sure of whether it will allow an unsolicited proposal or not. And that issue has lingered until now, until I saw a letter recently signed by the Secretary to the DOE. So 2 years ago, and to build a wind farm, EDC being the biggest, will only take 18 months. So we probably would have a new wind farm today. NCIP, it takes forever to get the consent. Believe me, I can go A to Z with the government agency, but I guess we wouldn't be talking about reserves if only it was easy for you to build the power plants. And that's what the private sector wants. It's not now a problem to build capacities because the renewable energy plants can be constructed in very short time, unlike coal plants. Solar farm can be built between 6 to 9 months, wind farm 18 months, biomass at most 2 years. So it's not easy, but we hope that the government will make it easier for the private sector to build those power plants. It doesn't have to take 200 permits. The good thing about the Philippines, there are so many lawyers, but at the same time, that's also a bad thing. We have so many laws, doing business law. Now he's become a businessman. But we have so many laws, we wrote a lot of laws, but we're very bad in implementation and execution. The EPIRA law was passed in 2001. Until now, it's not fully implemented. The RE law was passed in 2008, still not implemented fully. And now we just passed the Energy Efficiency Act. I'm sure it will not be implemented in the next 8 years. Someone was asking about the IRR. Maybe Yusek Posadas can answer that. Again, we just want government to make it easier for the private sector. The private sector will build if the government will help.
Yeah, okay. Let me respond to that because precisely the President is really looking at this very carefully. In fact, as you might know, he issued, one of the first things he issued is the EO30. And he mandates that if an agency accepts complete documentation, he only gives that particular agency 30 days to act on it, whether deny or approve, but not to sit on it. In fact, he has called an undersecretary and fired him on the spot for not acting. So, I think this is a president that really hates queuing. He really hates queuing. So, I think that's one of the things that we have to give this administration, that precisely
they would really like, this administration would really like to see investments come in. So, and then in fact, one of the new laws that he has also signed is the Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop, EVOS. Again, this is supposed to be an online thing, and he wants all of these applications, permits, being measured as to time, and he wants this to be online. In fact, the investment promotions of our investments promotion officer who's in charge of making this happen is here today, and she knows that this is a serious matter with regard to the president. So yeah, we are very much open to investments precisely because this is energy, and it takes so much investment to make it happen.
Thank you. Ray, do you want to say anything, any comments?
You know, we're all in the private sector, so we do all share the need for government support, and I'm not talking about financial support, but really government coming up with the right policies, and when the right policies are in place, of implementing them. In the sector that we're in, I think it's important for the government, and I would say principally the DOE and the ERC, to make sure that the policies and the laws are implemented. All stakeholders should be held to account for their respective duties and obligations under the law. We all know that there are constraints within the entire ecosystem. And principally, I think, as alluded to earlier, there is really significant transmission constraint. And that has to be solved. Because, you know, we can keep, you know, there could be a lot of interest to build plants. But if the transmission is constrained, then that power is not going to be delivered to where it should go. And that today is a huge, significant problem. Not to mention also that we want to promote renewable energy, but renewables being intermittent power or energy, they require actually reserves to be in place, or basically reactive power. So where is the reactive power reserves? There are none. So we've imposed the RPS on the utilities, so we are forced if we don't, we basically can suffer criminal and other penalties. But for RPS to be successful, which relies on renewables, these renewable plants have to be built. And the grid has to be ready for these renewables to come in. So it's a structural issue for me, that we already know who the stakeholders are, and the roles and responsibilities of each stakeholder is very clear under the law and the regulations. So government should actually be more forceful in implementing those rules and regulations.
Thank you, Ray. I guess just a bit to add. I mean, to be fair, talking about permits, and there are agencies, not necessarily always within the Department of Energy's control, NCIP, for example, and others. And we can only imagine how difficult it is to rein that in. But I guess with this, with the current laws that we have, and you alluded to the number of laws that we have, a lot of laws, maybe in a spirit of proactive engagement, maybe the private sector, that's one of the things put in the recommendations, try to really sit down. I know that in AmCham we've talked about, you know, trying to gauge whether the anti-red tape law, whether it actually works, where you have issues, with the intention, for example, of flagging it and saying this is how it can be improved. So maybe that's a potential takeaway the Department of Energy can have, so that, you know, we don't get bogged down in terms of the processes, because at the end of the day, time is of the essence. We are happily growing, the economy is growing, and yet at some point maybe the increase in installed capacity or even available capacity will not catch up. A second point is reserves, right? It's good that we have this discussion about reserves. In fact, on the other hand, too much reserves is also not good. There's an economic cost of too much reserves. And the paper cites that Singapore is about 48% reserves, right? Surplus. You know, you have Malaysia's about 38%. In fact, Malaysia's trying to ratchet down some of the power projects. On the other hand, it could also be misleading because, let's say, other countries like Indonesia has about 27, 28%, and Thailand is 55%. But because of transmission issues, Indonesia has 17,000 islands, we have about 7,000. So it's not a simple calculus of, oh, you just add capacity. I think there has to be a very thoughtful way to approach maximizing your capacity that goes in step with increasing the reliability and the redundancy of your transmission network. That goes to the comments of, I guess, that pervades all. So those are really the 2 points that really stick in my mind. We're lucky so far that over the course of the summer, we've not seen any major issues. But there is a cost there somewhere, and other countries are feeling the same. It doesn't mean that the Vietnams of the world are immune from these issues. It's just that we have a market that's unique in the region, that the private sector can actively engage with government and try to harness the efficiencies. So hopefully the policies that you've enumerated, Undersecretary, and some of the things that we've put out there could be acted upon. Time's up for us, but may I just ask if any of the panel members would like to just give one last parting message or shot?
Okay, let me start. For many of the investors here, actually, it's not grim in the sense that there is retail competition access. Of course, I think we could do better in accelerating retail competition access so that there's more choice for consumers. But having said that, for many of you who operate factories and are in industry, there is already open access for you guys, and you can actually bid out your requirements. And I think we're all here very active in the competition for delivering low-cost electricity to industry. And so I think that we already see how industry has reacted, in the sense that industry, the moment they qualify for being able to acquire their own requirements for electricity, they've taken advantage of that method of purchasing power. So as a last comment, it will be good to see us accelerate that so that the choice goes to the consumer level.
Yeah, just I guess I said so much already about government. The concept of efficiency in government operations is not new. And I can say that because I came from government, and Jockel came from government as well. And I see one of my idols, Secretary De Lima, who was given that recognition by AmCham. She has shown also efficiency in government. So it's not a novel concept. I think government can really be more efficient so that we can build more power plants.
I'll give the last chance for it to say something at the end. But for, again, I've said a lot of things already, but for Aboitiz Power, I think we're here to really support the country in terms of meeting the demand. But it's not just really just putting a power plant. We always have to consider the fuel technology, when to put it, the size, and where to put it, given the grid situation in the country. And we're here to support the investors, as Gal said, that are here through open access. Hopefully the threshold gets pushed down further from where it is today, so that more entities can actually participate. And as I said, this is just one of the good things that came out of EPIRA, and I think we are excited to see more.
Well, for us, for Meralco and for myself, I think first is EPIRA. EPIRA is a good law, and so it should be fully implemented. I think there has been debate of whether IPIRA is deficient, but it is good though. It benefits the consumers a lot actually, and we should fully implement it. So the ARCOA, which is part of IPIRA, has to be fully implemented. I understand that the DOE is going to come up with a policy already to implement the 750 kilowatts up to 999 kilowatts. That's very good for us. Believe it or not, I mean, yes, we do have captive customers, but ARCOA is good. I am a consumer. I should be able to buy my power also from GenCos. The second actually is government action. I think we need government to act faster in keeping with the times. I think developments arise very fast, and oftentimes we feel that the government is not as proactive, it's more reactive, and that actually hinders growth and sends actually a wrong signal to investors. And the third really is for government to look at the structural issues that plagues the industry, especially when when stakeholders do not step up and basically fulfill their responsibilities under the law. I mean, all of those have to be put in place by government, and that's why we look to the DOE and even the ERC for basically to ensure and to enforce basically this compliance within the industry.
Thank you, Ray. And maybe last words from Yusek.
Now, without divulging anything confidential that happens in the cabinet meetings, suffice it to say that all of these issues, which are very big issues, for example, the transmission constraints, are taken up at the highest of levels. And rest assured that this has already caught the attention of our president. And he will act on it. When the public interest is at stake, rest assured, he takes very, very serious action on these types of things.
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Entertainment question.
Yes, I thought we would not have time for a question, and maybe we don't, but I want to ask this question. We've got to think out of the box here. You talk about being efficient. There are two ways to be efficient. One is to get more fuel, and the other one is to make good use of the fuel, correct? This question I have to address to my friend Yusek Posadas. You see, fuel, if you put in CMT, coconut methyl ester, it has been shown that the price of fuel will go up, but the benefit will be much more than the input, and therefore all this talk about people getting scared of doing this because it's inflationary is ill-advised. It's like a plant. You give fertilizer, it's more expensive, but if the output is 10 times more, you must put it in, and it should be deflationary. I must raise this to you because we are in a country which has coconut farmers who are suffering, and other countries have it 15-20%. We are supposed to be 5%. We're still at 2% after all this time, and I've been there, and they keep on saying to me, we don't want the price of fuel to go up. For God's sake, it is not inflationary, it is deflationary. If you know economics, it is deflationary. So Mr. Posadas, I'm now giving it to the public. You have never disagreed that this study is wrong. You've always agreed that if you put in CMT, the output is much more than additional cost. But you said that truck drivers might get angry, people will say it's inflation. Sir, I now ask you in public, if it is more economical and more efficient to do this, and if in addition it will help our coconut farmers get out of poverty, in view of everybody here, would you like to now say that you will consider it? Because in the past you have told me not to consider it. Mr. Posadas, my friend, can you answer that question? Can you please consider it where other countries go to 20%, we're still at 2%, and the one I've heard all the time is you're afraid of the inflation and rumors of the truck drivers, when in fact we are not in a country that is populist, we're in a country that is supposed to be rational and economic. So Mr. Posadas, pagbigyan po ninyo ako, would you please consider this now?
In fact, I agree with you.
Wow.
there's no argument because really it's more efficient if you use the CME in the diesel engine because of the lubricative characteristic that it improves on the operation of the diesel combustion engine. So I agree with you, it's more efficient. Now the issue is, in fact, that is what I told the former Secretary of Agriculture. The issue really is how do we ensure that the benefits goes to the coconut farmer and not for the CME supplier. That's the whole issue. I agree with you. We want to help the farmer. But what happens? This is what happens. When the copra was at 40 per kilo, the CME was at 80. When the copra went down to 20, the CME stood at 80. So the issue is the benefit is going to the CME supplier. So that's why I told the Secretary of Agriculture, the former one, Mr. Secretary, don't we want to help the farmer? And he said, yes. Now please tell us if we improve. We agree with increasing the CME from 2 to 5. How do you ensure that that benefit goes to the farmer? He says, wait, I have to work it out.
Thank you. I will not take any more time, but those are two separate questions. The first question is it more efficient or not? Whoever gets the benefit, we must do what is more efficient, therefore must do it. As for the second one, I, sir, am with the farmers and we can fight that out. But that's a second topic. Let us do that. But we cannot do that unless we do the first. And let's just keep ourselves to economics. If it's economic correct, do it, sir. Sir, I will follow you. Regarding the second one, let me handle that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Question over there.
Yes, I have a question. Actually, this is about fuel in the power sector. Recently, there's a news that Manampaya is being sold, the state of Chevron is being sold to Udena Corporation of Dennis Uy. The missing middle there actually is who is the partner of Dennis Uy, if ever. My only question is, number one, because this is implication about energy security. That's number one, because it will fuel the power sector now and in the future. What is the assurance from the government that the partner will be coming in is not China and that the Philippines is not being sold to China? So that's a question to the government. My second question is about CSP. Because one of the big question mark actually is you have 33,000 of indicative capacity. So that's not a committed investment. How do you have that concretized into committed investment with all the questions about what should be the economics between greenfield and brownfield in the CSP process? So those two questions. And Cham might want to answer the question on Chevron as well.
What was the first question again?
The sale of Chevron on Manampaya State. What is the assurance that the partner coming in is not Chinese and it does have implications on sovereignty of the country?
Yeah, you're now referring to this sale of the stake of Chevron.
Yes.
To the company.
Of Dennis Uy.
Yeah. And you are asking, what was the question?
What are the assurances that there are safeguards from government that the partner that will come in, the partner of Dennis Uy is not a Chinese company, or in the process, we are not being taken over by a Chinese company in the future?
Well, these are very private transactions.
No, it's energy security. I asked the question as a Filipino.
No, yeah, you're asking it as a Filipino. I'm also a Filipino. In any case, because I also sit at the board of PNOC. One of the things that I have espoused is that very much similar to how it was done when the consortium, the Manampaya consortium was started.
PNOC should be involved when there's already a discovery. In other words, very similar to the Chevron share that is now taken over. So in other words, one good candidate for a shareholder is PNOC itself, government. Because really, it's something that's already there. Because the issue really in energy resource development is exploration is really the high risk and high investment space. Whereas when there's already a discovery, the risk is lower and there's more assurance of investments being returned. And therefore, in answer to your question, how do we ensure that there is no Chinese?
No.
Participa?
If a Chinese.
Palagi ko hindi ko masasagot yun. But I'm telling you that a good candidate is PNOC itself. So I think that's something that I can answer from the part of government.
May I have Yusek Posada's phone a friend? No, I think, and because I'm familiar with Malambaya, because I've worked with Chevron Malambaya, I think as probably everyone knows, the Malambaya project is a consortium of three parties, Shell, Chevron, and PNOC, EC, Exploration Corporation. The operator is Shell. So to protect that project and ensure that it complies with Presidential Decree number 87, Shell must be strictly monitored in terms of implementing the service contract. So that ensures that we continue to have control of the project. So I think that's food for thought for the government. We will not lose the interest because anyway what was sold more or less is an economic interest because Shell continues to be the operator. Now it becomes a different question if Shell sells it. And that I cannot answer for Yusek Posadas.
The second question.
Second question, CSP.
What
Can you repeat, Mirna?
Can you
You
please?
have the mic. Yeah. Because there's difference in the economics between greenfield and brownfield. So if you would have to concretize projects for
Okay.
upcoming capacities, how will you handle that?
Yeah, well, basically this is how it goes. A BU makes a projection, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years forward. And in that projection, of course, it is there, they will have to see where is the gap between the procured supply, supply procurement and the demand that franchise area. Sa kanila yun eh. So, in fact, it is also their planning of how they will allocate the base load, mid-merit, and peaking categories for that particular space that they see, or the gap, capacity gap that they would make. So the issue really is how do you make the playing field equal, even? So the view that, well, of course, this is now, because we still have to, what do you call that, stabilize the position, is that, well, my particular view is that for 5 years, of course, you can allow everybody to come in. 5 years forward, you allow everybody to come in. But for the 6 to the 10, I don't think a power plant can be built earlier than that. So, you allow all of those that can compete within that period. So, you have the likes of greenfields, you have the likes of merchant plants that are not as old. Because the issue really is the age, as a good president from Arangkada said. So, you allow, and the third category is this is when we have reserve market already. Those reserve plants that are, again, not that old, can also compete. So in other words, we open it up to reasonably equal playing field. So that's the whole intention. Now, for the 6 to 10, lahat yun, 15 to 20, again, so that's really what one reasonable person would look at it. Yeah, in fact, I have asked our Electric Power Industry Management Bureau and their supervising USEX and ASEX to please accelerate the reserve market, because that's really one space that can increase the supply. Because again, you have to understand that competitive selection process can only work when there is sufficient supply. That's basic. How can you have competitive selection process? Kulang. That's a no-brainer.
Okay, I think we've overextended. I hope everybody generated a lot of insight from this panel. Thank you, gentlemen, for your insights, and thank you very much. Good afternoon.
There you have it. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for our panel on the challenges in the power sector. May we please request that you stay on stage for a quick photo opportunity. While the speakers are having their photos on stage, may we remind the audience who may still have other questions to send them to forum@arangkadaphilippines.com.